Hi, I'm Lizzy and I'm a queer online business owner.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Outs Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. So on this week's episode, I am thrilled to introduce you all to Lizzy Goddard, who is a UK-based online business strategist. So Lizzy, welcome to the show. It's great having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here on such a niche podcast, but such a important podcast to have a space for these conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah. The visibility is really, really important. And I'm grateful that you're spending some time with us today. And for our audience, just to give them a little bit of background of who you are, I'd love just to share a brief snippet of your bio with them. So for folks who aren't familiar, Lizzy is a UK-based online business strategist and educator for entrepreneurs. So definitely there's going to be a lot that she offers in the show today for us. And over her 5 years in business, she's helped over 9,000 students learn how to do business the easy way, the fun way, and the profitable way. She's grown her business to multiple six figures, all while breaking almost all of the marketing rules. So I'm excited to hear about that. Mm-hmm. And she's also been featured on multiple podcasts, including The Shift Show and Spinoff Success. And she's also served as a guest expert at multiple well-known online summits, including Mariah Icons of Online Courses and Jordan Gill's Done in a Day interview series. So these are some really interesting resources I'm not super familiar with, but I'd love to check those out. So thanks for being here, Lizzy. This is great. I'd love for you to share just a little bit with our audience why you got started. What's your origin story of getting started in business 5 years ago?
This business started 5 years ago, but I think all my life I've been quite entrepreneurial, and I've always been buying and selling things. Like when I was 11, I was buying and selling things on eBay. And the first proper business, in air quotes, that I did was a zine distro when I was 17, because I don't know if you know about zines, like fanzines, self-published magazine things. Queer people tend to know about them more so than straight people I meet. But there wasn't any good zine distros in the UK, really. So I started a zine distro, and the focus was on personal zines, perzines, with a real focus on queer and feminist women's voices. So that was my first foray into figuring out email lists and websites and stock and social media and all of that. And I got to do some really cool things when I was running that distro. I did it for about 7 years. So I got featured in a big lesbian magazine in the UK, and I got invited to book launches and different events. And I got to do some really cool stuff with that. So I was at university, and at university, I was women's officer. Then I was LGBT officer. And then I was elected education officer, which was a sabbatical paid year-long position to represent all things education. So I was a trustee of a £1 million organization, and I was talking with all the bigwigs all day. So at the age of 21, I had a far sense of self-importance that was far beyond what my sense of self-importance actually should have been at that age. And I had chronic fatigue syndrome since I was 16, and the stress of that year really flared it up, and I got a lot of chronic pain. So when I finished that year, I started a master's, and I dropped out of the master's because I was far too ill, pretty much housebound at that point. And it was that year, so this was 2013, I came across the lifestyle design world. I had a friend who had a blog, and she sent emails. And this was just very curious to me, because here were these people traveling the world, making money from their laptops. And I'm just well, I don't want to travel the world, but could I make money from my laptop from my bed? Because that would be amazing. And later that year, so I was really ill at the time, but I'm always the sort of person who's always doing something. I launched a business called The Pillow Fort, which was for young people with chronic illness, a lot of positivity and fun. And that went quite well for quite a few years. It had, online community, a digital magazine, physical products. I started doing some paid workshops and such. But if there's ever an audience that can't afford things, it's young people with chronic illness. And so my health had improved a little bit over that time. And then I decided I was going to be a maths teacher, because that had always been my lifelong plan B, was like, if I don't know what else to do, I'll be a maths teacher. So I got a place on a maths teacher training course, and I had about 8 months to kill before the course started. So I looked at my skill set. I was in quite a lot of online courses and programs and working with coaches and such for my pillow fort business. And I was like, well, I'm going to start as a VA. I'm going to be a VA just for 8 months before I start my teacher training qualification. And I absolutely fell in love with doing it. Like within a few weeks, I had quite a few clients because I was quite well networked. And I was getting paid to faff around on the internet all day, which is what I'd been doing before. But now people were paying me. So long story short, I never took up the place to become a teacher. And I was an accidentally permanent VA, virtual assistant. And over the years, I started to specialize more as a tech virtual assistant. I became certified in ConvertKit, which is email marketing software. And sort of over time, I just started creating my own courses and trainings and programs on online businessy topics like launching and affiliate marketing and paid live trainings and all sorts of different things. And over time, my business has just sort of like morphed into helping online business owners with online businessy things. And I currently call myself an online business strategist. And I sort of like let go of the virtual assistant clients and that sort of work. And now I pretty much exclusively do courses and trainings and group programs. And so I've only had a proper job, in air quotes, a part-time admin assistant job for 3 weeks before I quit, because I hated it, because I was, at the bottom of the pecking order, and it was just so inefficient. And I realized I was not important in this bigger picture of everything going on at the university that I was working at then. And I hated it and I quit. So I've never really had a proper job. This is always what I've been doing in one way or another almost.
So entrepreneurship was, you had that fire in your belly, and it was just, it was a part of who you are. And that's very clear from 2013 to where we are today in 2021. Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit of how you decided to make that leap from virtual assistance work to, what I'm imagining in doing that work, you're seeing all the systems that it takes to have an online business run and function. So when did you feel like you were, in air quotes, I guess, with that theme of being ready to say, I am now a business strategist and I can deliver a lot of value to other people trying to start online businesses, whatever they might look like?
Mm-hmm. It was a really slow process. So I had an audience of people who used ConvertKit, because I was a ConvertKit certified expert and I'd really thrown myself into that. So I'd created a membership about ConvertKit, and then I created some group programs about ConvertKit, which I turned into courses. And then I did a course teaching other VAs and tech service providers how to specialize in a specific tool. So I taught ConvertKit first and foremost, which I knew very, very well and I was very confident in. And then I taught people how to do what I had done. So I still felt confident enough doing that. And then I started doing paid live training. So like webinars, but they're paid and actually it's not all fluff and there's no pitch at the end. And I started doing them on very, very specific things that I wasn't really saying like, I know how to help you. I was saying, would you like to pay this small amount of money to come to this training and get the recording of something I have done? And I will tell you everything I have done. I will show you exactly what I did, what I said, how it worked. I'm pretty confident you'll get something out of it. Like, I'm not promising any specific results here. I first did one on affiliate marketing, the lazy guide to affiliate marketing, because I'm super lazy with affiliate marketing, but I make good money from it.
Yeah.
And then I did one on like fast launching and how I went from idea to launch really quickly. And I started doing them on all these different things. And what I sort of found happened was that I would do these trainings. They were super low cost to start with. People would take what I taught and get similar results. And that kind of, then I could go back over that paid live training recording and either chop it up into a course or like sell it again. And it almost sort of like snowballed over time, so that each thing I started out, here's what I did, do you want to learn about it, became, here are all these other people that I've taught this to who've had the same results. So sort of like, it wasn't lack of confidence per se, but it enabled me to grow that confidence slowly, as opposed to coming out with some huge signature course that's completely untested. I've spent a year building it. I have no idea if anyone's going to buy it. It was much more specific, bite-sized trial and error experimenting with what I was doing.
That's the beauty of the internet, right? When you kind of like put it a little bit out there and you can test it and change it as you go along, rather than, like you said, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with assuming you know exactly what potential clients want. So you build the whole thing in advance and only to sometimes be met with crickets. I've been there before. So
yes, so many people have, and so many people still teach it. And I think even if, you know, you've got a really robust market research scheme, for newer business owners who are getting started, there is absolutely no momentum to be gained by spending months creating something, even no matter how much market research and whatnot you've done. It's just not the way to get any momentum. And that's what I found for myself and my clients. So I'm all about do small, specific paid offers, get them out there super fast. Like, out there is better than an idea in your head. Like, do it messy. It's about what you know that's important, not the like presentation necessarily, and improve it incrementally over time, because you never know which things are going to be huge hits. Like, I have done paid live trainings that I was so excited to deliver them, and I was so excited to share what I knew, and nobody really cared. And then I've done other ones which I thought would just be silly one and done ones, and the interest in them was so great, and so many people have taken them, and I've turned them into much bigger courses, and you know, they're in their evergreen funnels making me money all the time. And I could never have predicted that, and I would never have created it if I only focused on creating huge courses that take months to build and launch and all of that.
Yeah. So speaking about never predicting, or, you know, not having that crystal ball of looking into the future, we're in pandemic times, right? And so recognizing a lot of people are pivoting, not just their businesses, like for the entrepreneurs that you work with, but also individuals pivoting their entire careers, where many more people are now entering into the world of entrepreneurship. And so I'm wondering, are you seeing that as an opportunity for the business that you've created and providing support to those folks that are newer into the world that we've been swimming in for quite some time?
Definitely. So last year was a really, really big year for my business. I more than doubled my revenue from the year prior. And I think a lot of people, a lot of my clients, a lot of my students, they had businesses that were in-person businesses or bricks and mortar businesses that could no longer be. And I think the approach of let's take something specific and make that into a paid offer, rather than trying to translate everything you know and make that into a paid offer, has really resonated with them. And then I've also definitely worked with lots of people who they were just kind of like, oh, screw it. 2020 is the year. If you can't start your business finally in 2020, what good is this year? So I've definitely worked with people who've had a dream for a long time. And maybe even it's just a side hustle now that they're starting alongside their job. Or in the UK, a huge number of people are still furloughed and are still being paid for jobs that may never be there again. And yeah, I've seen lots of people like try it out because the world's so topsy-turvy anyway. Like there's probably never a better time to try that dream of, let's see if I can figure this online thing out now.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like your business, like you're both a business coach, right? But also some kind of, I'm not going to say therapist, right? Because you have to have special degrees for that. But, you know, some kind of like cheerleader of sorts, you know, to kind of like help people work through those mindset challenges that pop up sometimes of like, well, I'm not ready, or I'm not good enough, or I haven't built that course yet, like what we were talking before. How do you, for those folks that we're talking about right now who might be furloughed, they're thinking 2020 is the year, but they're still trying to get their mindset in alignment with what they want to do, their purpose. Do you find yourself in that role of trying to encourage? And if so, how do you, like, what's kind of your secrets in moving people forward and inspiring them to follow their business dreams?
So yeah, I definitely help people with a lot of the mindset gremlins, and quite often I can be quite tough love. I know a lot of clients would say my voice is in their head and they do or don't do things based on what they know I'm going to say when they tell me. But the way I have found to do it is kind of, you have to find the accountability that works for you. So social accountability, it doesn't really work for me. Like I'm okay to reschedule things, and I'm okay to like say I'm going to do something and no one's invested in me doing it or not. So it doesn't really matter. But what I have found works so well for me is when I have an idea, I take that excited energy and I sell with that excited energy. So usually it's some sort of pre-selling. Like I create a super simple sales page and I throw it out there. I start taking money for the thing and the pre-sell. Quite often it's for a paid live training that's going to be in a couple of weeks, or it might be like a mini course that I'm going to release, and I tell everyone when it's coming. Yeah. And then what's happened is hopefully I've made some sales. So then I create it with the excitement that I have made some sales of this thing. So now I've got to do it because these people have given me money and I'm being paid to create this now. And even better, I can often ask them, hey, what are you really hoping to learn? And they will tell me. And then that creates the thing for me from their questions. And then I create it and I do it and I deliver it. And then it's done. But I think what quite often happens is people get really excited about something and then they try to create it. And by the time they get round to maybe selling it, that excitement has dwindled. So I sell with the initial excitement and then I create with the excitement and the expectation of people who've already bought it. So I'm a big fan of pre-selling things to force me to do the things. And this is like an approach that has really helped my clients as well.
I love that. I think like knowing the kind of accountability that works for you, and that there's not one way, there's not one kind.
There's not.
And yeah, and this, that it going to like a simple sales page for an idea that excites you and seeing if that excitement is met back, you know, like for the people that you serve of like, oh, I'm on the right path, or no one bought that fantastic course that I thought was going to be the thing. And
you haven't wasted much time on it.
Exactly,
and you can move on to the next thing.
Totally.
And in the same way, like a lot of people will have coming soon websites, or this course is coming soon, and it can be coming soon for years. And I'm like, what do you think that's doing for your reputation? Like every time someone comes to your site, it's coming soon. It's such a heavy energy, and it just doesn't make you look like a action taker. Like it's not that you seem untrustworthy from it per se, but it's kind of like you just don't seem to be taking action or getting movement. And no matter what you are helping people with, people want to work with people who show up and do things and encourage them to do things and get results and transformations and solve problems in their own lives. So I so often I work with new clients and I'm like, how long has this said this is coming soon? And if it's more than like 2 months or they can't tell me when it's actually coming, I'm like, take it down. That energy is so heavy. It is not helping you.
That is such great advice, right? Like, and maybe like then exploring like what's going on there, like
yes.
what's holding you back. And I love that, the taking action piece. That's like when I ask other guests, what's one piece of advice you would have for aspiring entrepreneurs? And it's like, just do it, take the action, with a plan, right? And
yes.
be calculating. So I'm wondering, like, you've worked with 9,000 entrepreneurs-ish, probably at this point. And so from the folks that you've worked with, and, they probably are at different stages of being in this world of entrepreneurship. What's something surprising that you've learned about this world that we swim in that you didn't know pre-2013 before you got started?
It's not surprising per se, but like, I just find it just feels like the online business world is just this magical place where it just blows my mind. My mind has been boggling since 2013 when I found this world, that there are people on the internet who I will never meet, who I will never know anything about, who will find me somehow and they will give me money that I can spend on food in the shop. And in exchange, I will tell them something I know. Like my friend once called it like the online business world is just Wi-Fi and dreams. And I'm like, that's so beautiful. Like it's just this magical, and some people can be quite cynical about it being like, a pyramid scheme, and there's coaches teaching coaches to coach who are teaching coaches to coach. And I'm like, yes, but at any time you can take the money out and buy food. And I just think I'm so in awe and gratitude that this is what I get to do. And because I'm B2B, this is what I get to help other people do. And I just want everyone to know about this and experience this. And I know it doesn't work that everyone does. And I've met, many of my friends are just not interested in what I do or the online business world, no matter what I tell them. But I just think it's so magical.
Yes. Well, you've said two things so far. I'm like mindset gremlins and Wi-Fi plus dreams. I'm like, I'm loving this. This is like,
it's whimsical.
Yeah. I mean, it is a magical world, but there's also, the pieces that are challenging. And I mean, you had talked about, surviving chronic fatigue syndrome. And I'm wondering, as you work with entrepreneurs, do you give folks advice or guidance around, pushing up against that burnout that sometimes can happen when we get excited about building a business? The sky's the limit. There is no ceiling. We almost can take action to a point where then it's not serving ourselves. And I'm just wondering, like, it sounds like you've seen it, you might have experienced it yourself. Like what kind of guidance do you provide to those students that you coach and work with?
Definitely. So it's definitely something I talk about with my clients and my students. It's something I predominantly work with women, not exclusively. I'd say it's about 90% women and women identifying people that I work with. I don't market that way. It just happens that way. And many of them are parents. A lot of them do have chronic illnesses, or there's a lot of neurodiversity in my audience. And there's just different factors to how hard they can work. Like, I'm not about the hustle. I have mild chronic fatigue syndrome myself now, and I'm the mum of 2 toddlers, and it's, we just a year of pandemic with very little childcare and support. And like, I've definitely burnt out in the past. And I think for me, what I usually tell clients and students when I can sense, like often someone else can sense it's getting a bit much before they're even aware of it. But for me, it's about let's get everything down on paper first and foremost. So like, let's write down, like, just do a massive brain dump, just like dump it all down on a bit of paper, because otherwise, if you're holding things in your head, you can't get a handle on the situation. So I'm like, write it down all on a bit of paper, or several bits of paper, as the case may be. And the next thing I usually encourage them to do is to think about, like, what's the priority right now? Like, what is underlying this overwhelmed feeling? Is it the lack of time? If so, let's knock off some of these smaller tasks and get a little bit of momentum going. Is it money fears and you need to keep, you've got money stresses and you need to make some more money? Okay, let's prioritize which of these tasks are going to bring in money in the short term. The other ones can wait for now. Is it that you are feeling kind of like run down and like, what's the point? I'm working so hard, I'm not seeing any success. Then I would be like, well, let's prioritize some of these tasks that feel really fun right now and you feel really excited about. So that's my approach. And the other thing that I'm telling my clients and students all the time is to quite a lot of people I work with worry about things that may or may not happen in the future. So they're worrying, well, what's going to happen when I get my first refund request? And I'm like, well, have you got your first refund request? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, that's a future you problem. Like, I'm all about giving I'm obsessed with future me. Like, future me will deal with anything. And future me is going to be so much better equipped to deal with things, because when future me gets the refund request, I'm going to know the context. I'm going to be further along in my business. I'm going to have made the sale before I got the refund request. Like, some of them are worrying about the refund request before they've even made the first sale. So a very quick reply I give a lot of my clients and students is, that sounds like a future you problem. That sounds like a future Jane problem. That sounds like a future Ben problem. Like, it's a future you problem. And I think that helps them like snap out of worrying about things that aren't here yet, and put it in the future, because future you will be far better equipped with it, deal with it if and when it happens.
Yeah, it's amazing how we can spin off and just kind of come up with all of these creative scenarios where it's like, really, is that really going to happen? But that's that kind of like anxiety that kind of paired with fear, just ugh. But I think there's real power in what you're suggesting of just like even putting it all down on paper and just kind of seeing it before you. It sometimes makes, like you said, what may feel like something invisible in your head very visible. And sometimes when you look at it, it's like, oh, okay, there's, especially with the power of a coach to kind of work through some of that.
Come up with an action plan. Maybe you need to reschedule things. Maybe you need a bit of a rest. Like, there's lots of ways, but you can't figure out a plan if it's just swirling in your head. Like, you've got to make it real and actually look at it. But a lot of people, when they're overwhelmed, they don't want to look at what's causing the overwhelm. Mm-hmm. So they just keep swirling it around in their head. But I always writing things down when when your head's just feeling a bit full, you just got to write it down and be like, oh, well, actually, I don't need to worry about that right now, or this is the priority, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So another thing that sometimes can induce fear for those of us who are LGBTQ is that dynamic of the coming out process, and in the workplace that can feel a little unsettling, in particular if you're working for someone else, you're worried about job security, et cetera, minus that kind of 3-week stint of doing admin work. You realize like working for someone else wasn't for you. And even so, I'm curious, you are kind of putting out who you are and what you're doing in your work. And you said that you primarily attract women, which is great. You have a sense of who that kind of ideal client is. Even so, have you ever encountered a challenge of just sharing, being implicitly out, right? It's like, oh, everyone knows, but then sometimes it's like, oh, wait, this person has no idea who I am. And so I'm going to have to come out. So how have you negotiated that with running your business? And have you run into any challenges with kind of, okay, how do I disclose this really important part of who I am in the work that I do every day?
Yeah. So I think I very consciously always been kind of like overly out in my business. Like, it's all over my social media. It's on my about page. In some ways, it's been helpful that I've had a girlfriend, now wife, the entire time I've had my business, because that meant that I can more casually drop it into conversation. I think it's a lot harder if you're single to more casually reference. And also in the UK, like, girlfriend in the UK means romantic partner, whereas I know, like, in America and such, girlfriend could just be a friend who happens to be a woman. So I've always been super out. And the reason for that is, certainly when I was a VA, I never wanted to work with anyone who didn't know that I was queer, because I never wanted to be in a situation where they found out and they were uncomfortable about it. So I've always, like, when I always feel like I want to be friends with my clients, both when I was a VA and now. And that involves talking about what I did at the weekend, like my wife and I did this at the weekend and that sort of thing. So I've never experienced any direct issues because, to the best of my knowledge, no one has ever worked with me who didn't know in advance that I was queer. So I kind of like filtered them off already. I think what's more interesting now is that in a lot of conversations in the online business space, particularly like groups of women entrepreneurs and such, there is this assumption that everyone is straight. And there's this language around like retiring your husband, which there's no equivalent for if you're in a same-sex relationship. Like, I suppose I retired my wife, but that's not something that I'm going to proudly talk about in a beautiful social media post, because it's not really a thing. And the other sort of like thing that people joke a lot, it is a joke, but it's not quite right, is that, like, a lot of very successful women business owners will say that they need a wife. And they will mean that in terms of they need a woman in their life to organize their life, to do all the traditional wife roles. And I'm like, well, I have a wife, but it's not what you mean. And you're kind of like, I don't know, like, I see that one quite a lot. And every time I'm just like, there are people reading this who are women with wives, and it's not what you mean. And you should be more clear. And it's not particularly feminist in many ways. So I think it's slightly more, there are, and my wife and I adopted 2 little girls a couple of years ago. And a lot of the language around parenting, like all the mumpreneur groups and all of that, it's almost like it hasn't occurred to them that mumpreneurs, you can be a mumpreneur and you might not have given birth to a child, or you might not have a husband who has a 9-to-5 job. And it's just a little tiring. I think I'm the sort of queer person who, for the most part, doesn't face virtually any discrimination or like real issues. I'm just in that phase where I'm just like, things are just a bit tedious and tiring, how people assume things and think that there are not queer people in the room and what they're saying, the impact of what they're saying. It's almost like microaggressions. They just don't quite realize that it's just a bit tedious.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I was just like scrolling down. It's like, number one, like language matters so much.
Yes.
And just the invisibility and erasure, but also like for yourself of assessing, even if you're in a mompreneur group, right? Like, is this space for me if these assumptions about gender and who my partner is or how I've constructed my family isn't taken into account? And, most of the time it's like the good intentions that have bad impacts for us, where it's like, oh, not again, because it's like, sometimes you find yourself in these groups trying to get information and to grow as a business owner yourself. And then it's kind of, do I wear my education hat and talk about how the group could be more inclusive? And
sometimes, sometimes you pick the battles, and sometimes I ask questions to get to what I want them to figure out for themselves. Sometimes I just come out and say it. For example, there was someone who was running a retreat, and it was a women-only retreat. and no partners allowed. And I'm like, it was for women business owners, no partners allowed. And I'm like, but I'm a woman business owner and my wife is a woman business owner. Is she not allowed? And I challenged it, and she apologized for the oversight of what she had said, and she understood and she changed the wording. And I'm like, great, but and I'm really pleased about that. But it's tiring to have to constantly point out people's language fails.
Yeah. And sometimes it's tiring, but I try to find like in my own world where it's like, okay, this is a way for me to assess, is this space for me or not? Mm-hmm. Or if it's a space I really want to be in, it's like, okay, so there's a learning edge here for this leader of the group, right? And yes. And it helps them be better. And sometimes that can build a strong relationship. But these are like, I think it's like the 10% that makes LGBT business owners. We're in the space where 90% is the same challenges that most entrepreneurs deal with. But then there's this piece of just kind of, are we safe in the space? Do we trust folks with sharing more about our lives or not?
And it's like when you're choosing a coach, you have to scroll through their social media. And at the moment, I'm hiring for a position in my business. And, I have to scroll through social media and look for any warning signs of, has this person been a bit transphobic? Are they a massive Trump supporter? Do their values align with my values? And I don't think some people obviously do a values check, but I think there's an extra layer of it. You have to protect yourself. It's one thing for people to choose if they want to work with me or not, but if I'm choosing if I want to work with someone else or not, I have to do a quick check. And sometimes people that I have followed and liked and respected for a long time come out and say things that are really problematic or offensive. And that really hurts sometimes. Someone recently who I've loved for years has come out and said some really transphobic things. And that's really sad and that really hurts. And, it's just an extra layer of it. And it's not a conscious thing all the time, but it just is a bit tiring when it comes up.
Yeah. I get it. I'm totally there with you. And I think for what you're sharing, I think there's probably a lot of head nods right now of like, yeah, I have been there before. So thank you, Lizzy, for making that like more clear of like how it shows up for you. I really appreciate that. It's not the highest point of this interview, but it's important. Some of the things that get in the way for us. But on the flip, right, we have a lot of really incredible lived experiences of being a part of the LGBTQ plus community. And so I'm wondering for you, when you think about your lived experiences, the things that are pretty unique for you being a member of the Rainbow family, do you see like one or two of these lived experiences being translated into a superpower, like a trait that allows you to stand out in your business?
Definitely. I think the two big ones for me, and it took me quite a long time in my business to do it, but the first was when I started breaking the rules of how online marketing and online business should be. That's when my business started to feel a lot better and started to work a lot better. And in so many ways, all my life looking back, like I've broken the rules of who I should be as a woman, as a queer person, even there's so many rules that I have broken throughout my life of what was expected of me in air quotes. And when I started doing that in my business, that really, really helped and resonated with people and gave other people permission to break the rules. And then I think the other thing that I've only really started to do more recently, but it's become a really big part of my business, is this idea of owning that I have this big, slightly messy, beautiful, multi-passionate, multi-offer, multi-fun business. And I realized that in the past, a lot of coaches and mentors I've worked with, I only brought some of my business to them because, we were working on a specific type of course or program. So like I'd never talk about the affiliate marketing, even though that's, 30% of my income. I'd never bring that because they were only interested in a specific thing. And a lot of my work now is about, so many people teach like having one signature offer. And that's just not me. I just want so many offers. I get so bored. I'm so multi-passionate. I want to talk about all the things and do all the things. And I spent a lot of time trying to, in the past, like niche down and choose what my focus was and what I want to be known for. And just kind of like throwing that rule book out the window, embracing all the things, creating, like I sold 20 different offers last year. And it was my best year ever, like just embracing all of it and all of me. And I'd done it in my personal life before, but it was the first time I'd done it in my business because I think, like everyone, there's a right way to do business. And I sort of say like now, like I've created my own profitable playground, like fun is very important to my business.
Yeah.
And this ecosystem of offers and things and ideas. And yeah, like, I feel like now I'm showing up so much more. It's all of me. And that's making my business work so much better.
Yeah, I love that. I love like the breaking of the rules and that is something that's in alignment with being a part of the LGBT community because
yes,
it's not like we were necessarily given a playbook of how to construct.
No.
And so we're definitely the artists of our own lives in some ways. And I think that's a human experience, right? Is to have a sense of who you are. And as challenging as it can be to be a member of the LGBTQ community at the same time is that gift of kind of just breaking free a little bit of like, okay, I'm trusting a deep inner core of who I am. And the same, it's translating for you in your business, right? Of like,
it is.
I know how this is supposed to be run, right? And yet I feel called to do it in this fashion. And you're reaping a lot of rewards, right? For just kind of trusting your gut. And I think that's a really, really important reminder for folks that are listening, some of whom may totally disagree with how you're structuring your business because they're called.
Definitely.
That's totally good. I think the other piece that I picked up from what you shared there is that piece on fun. You've mentioned that a couple times in your podcast. I'm sensing that from you, and that's fun for you is to constantly have your brain, stimulated with something new. I've heard from, I think a couple of guests have shared this over the past, but it's like, you're working on the business that you have while you're building the business that you want to have for your future self, right?
Yes.
So
I love that.
Having those multiple offers is helping you kind of figure out this is working now, but I'd really love to test these two other ideas right now.
Yeah.
In the future. So really, really interesting way of thinking about how to build and grow a business. So I really appreciate that. With a little bit of time that we have left, I wanted to kind of pick your brain for, since you work with so many entrepreneurs, thinking about those folks that are listening to the show, 2020 maybe was their year, but they haven't quite gotten started yet. How would you, what's some advice that you would share for those folks, whether they're a part of the LGBTQ community or not, just to take that first entrepreneurial, maybe not a leap, but just a move in that direction of exploring starting their own businesses?
I think my main advice would be to create a very small, very specific paid offer. I'm a really big fan of starting with a paid offer because the momentum of receiving money, like I teach my students how to create a tripwire offer, which is someone signs up to their email list and on the thank you page, there is a low cost offer. And the celebration that they feel when someone buys their $9 ebook for the first time is so magical because it's just confirmation that, yes, I have something valuable, like valuable information, valuable ideas to share with the world in exchange for money that I can buy food with. And I would always say start with a very small, very specific paid offer, and then you can build the momentum and grow it from there.
Nice. I love that.
It doesn't have to be a whole business. It can just be a little thing that you've stuck up a PayPal button for and you've posted on your personal Facebook being like, I made this thing. Does anyone want it? Or I'm doing this training on this day for this price. Do you want to come? Because people are so much more networked than they think. You don't need a huge audience to get started. You need a customer and then another one and then another one. But your first customer probably knows multiple other good fit next customers, and it can grow from there. So you're not creating a business overnight. You're selling one paid thing.
Yeah. It's a simple action and something within reach, and you don't need a website. You don't need to have all of the fancy things that sometimes hold people back and thinking
it does.
Coming soon, right? The coming soon energy, which is
yes.
Well, this is awesome, Lizzy. I really have appreciated getting to know you, learning about your business, learning about what brings you to the LGBTQ community. So before we go, could you share with our guests the best place to find you online so they can learn more about your work?
Yes. So if you go to elizabethgoddard.co.uk/pod, POD, you will find a selection of freebies and different things. I've got so many different offers in my business. I can never pick one. So go there and hopefully you can find something that you want to sign up for and we can stay connected.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Lizzy. This was great. Really appreciate everything that you shared. And thank you, everyone who's tuned in to this week's episode. It's always a privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Lizzy. So details from today's conversation are up on our website, outentrepreneur.com. We will have the show notes of where you can find Lizzy and all of the amazing offers that you have. And for now, keep showing up as authentically as you want in your work and in your life. And we'll connect again next Tuesday. Thanks.